Welcome everyone to Unhidden Podcast, the only place that you're gonna find real conversations around neurodiversity. So for our third episode, now we're changing roles again. I'm gonna be the interviewer to my co-host, Drew Smith, and he's gonna tell us his story, unfiltered, and hopefully we can go further than what he has talked about this in the past, same as how it happened to me. So Drew, I think for this episode, I want to touch a lot on Drew as a person, because it's very easy for us to see Drew the founder, Drew the LinkedIn person, I think in these days, people are constructing a lot of facades publicly because it's so easy to have like a brand out there. But I think when we talk about things that make us think about our past versions or our history here in this planet, that's when we get the raw version of ourselves. So I think I want to start this interview by asking you, what is, regardless of your diagnosis, that we're going to jump into that in a little bit, I think I want to know what chapter in your life shaped you the most, like the Drew of today. Why? Why and what did it teach you?
Which chapter of my life shaped me into the Drew that I am today most? I would honestly say probably the chapter of my life from probably I would say 12 years old through about 18 years old. So junior high school probably shaped me the most into who I am today. Okay. I'm very fortunate that I have just an amazing family and an amazing set of parents and grandparents. And I feel like in that age range is when I got the most advice that was practical for me and that I was old enough to really understand and take to heart. Okay. And it's all of that advice that I got from my parents and my grandparents that, in my opinion, has shaped me into who I am today. And most of that advice probably came in that 12 to 18 timeframe.
So my understanding, you were an only kid, an only child.
No, I actually have an older brother.
Okay.
He's 2.5 years older than me. Okay. He has not given me any advice that I've taken with me. That's a subtle dig at him, but yeah, he's probably given me some sort of advice at some point in time. But yeah, I mean, he and I are very close, so we joke around with stuff like this. But yes, I have one older brother, but that's it.
Okay, so in this conversation, kind of going back to the past a little bit, would you say that in that stage that shaped you when you were a kid, you chose Drew the kid with your grandparents and your parents? Would you say today, knowing what you know about yourself, that young Drew was fully accepted?
Fully accepted by my family, yes. Okay. Fully accepted by anybody outside of my family, absolutely not, no.
Tell me more. Why? And cool.
I think like a lot of folks that grow up with this diagnosis, whether they've been diagnosed or not, you are branded as, the weird kid, the shy kid. I was, I had a couple of things that kind of worked against me is, number one, I skipped a grade when I was very young. So, I was the youngest kid in my grade. I was also, I'm actually not this anymore, but at the time I was very, very small. I was very late to growing. And so I was this little tiny, young, smart kid, and I had big, thick glasses. I now wear contact lenses. So if you think about the stereotypical nerd from 80s and 90s pop culture, like you could have put my picture there and it would have fit right in with the stereotypical nerd. And so, because of that, I was picked on a lot. I was bullied a lot. I was an easy target for bullies because I was so small that I couldn't fight back. So I got bullied and picked on a lot, and was painfully shy back then, painfully quiet. So I didn't really, nobody really knew who I was because, between being shy and quiet and being picked on, I just didn't talk to people. So nobody really knew who I was, but they had already chosen, without knowing who I am, they had already chosen that they didn't accept me and that they didn't want me around.
Isn't that crazy that happens so early in life? Like when people already create an image of you without really knowing who you are because they don't ask. And I think that was going to be my next question. Like, it can be one or as many things as you want. What are those things that you wish someone asked the young Drew?
I mean, honestly, I don't really wish anybody had asked me anything because one, I probably wouldn't have even known how to respond to the question because, if somebody had asked me like, why are you so quiet? I don't know. I don't understand what's going on in my own brain. I don't understand any of this stuff. So I don't know why I'm so quiet. Why are you so small? I don't know. I'm taking me so long to grow. Like, it's I don't think there's anything that anybody could have asked me that would have changed their opinion of me because I wouldn't have had an answer,
Okay, fair. It's funny that now we are seeing more information, especially, and we're going to jump into your late diagnosis now, but I find fascinating that now we're finding similarities in the childhoods of people that are neurodivergent. Because you say, like, it took me a while to grow up. I was exactly the same. Like now people see me and I am tall and these things, but I have stretch marks in my knees. No woman has women have stretch marks in their bellies and everywhere else, but I have them in my knees because I kind of stretch later in life. And I find it so funny that you're kind of telling the same story that I had. And so let's jump to it because I wanted for people to understand a little bit of your background of who was the Drew of a few years back before this thing happened. And this thing is your diagnosis. And so I want to know exactly the same question that you asked me, but I want to add something to it. I want to know if you actively pursue a diagnosis because you said there's something that doesn't check in, or you found, or it was coincidental. And I think what I want to add to it is, were you alone? Or was it was there more people involved in this late diagnosis? So tell me how it was.
Yeah, great question. So I got my diagnosis actually last year, February of 2024, at the age of 45 years old. Right. And I actually actively sought a diagnosis for autism. And I had, so like a lot of folks with autism that get diagnosed later in life, I had self-diagnosed. And my self-diagnosis happened, over the year, basically 12 months leading up to my formal diagnosis. And there was some interesting things that led me to self-diagnose. So it's interesting. The very first thing that caught my attention was, we both work in marketing, and I was at the Adobe Summit, massive conference. And I was speaking at the conference, and I was there, my company is very, very small. We're, just a handful of people. And, I was there, and this is actually before we had really hired many, many people. And so I was at this conference by myself, and which is fine. I'm fine being by myself. I got no problem with that. But I'm there by myself. And as I'm there, people were walking up to me that I knew that were going, Drew, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you in person. And it's people that I had only ever met through Zoom calls and things like that.
So weird. Uh-huh.
And the interesting thing to me, and what caught my attention, is so many times this would happen where I would not recognize them. Obviously, they were recognizing me, but
Like
I
the
was not
pieces?
recognizing them.
Or the names?
I couldn't picture who they were. I couldn't put a name to the face.
Okay.
And so every single time I had to look at their name badge, and it was a little awkward. And so I was like, and it happened multiple times. And I was like, what is this? I've never experienced this before. What is this? And so for some reason, my brain had kind of like latched onto a term called face blind. And I was like, I don't know if this is a real term, but it feels like it should be a real term, where I'm face blind. I can't, see these faces for who they are. And so I got back to my hotel room, literally my very first night there. And I'm like, is there a thing where people are face blind to people that they've never met in person before, but have met on like Zoom calls? And I Googled it, and they're like, yes, it actually is fairly common in folks with autism spectrum disorder. And I'm like, interesting. Okay. I had never considered that I might be on the spectrum at this point. So this was just like the first little domino to fall, right?
Okay.
So later on, same conference, I'm at these networking sessions, and I'm there by myself, but I know some people, and what I found is I'm at this networking event. It's like just a happy hour at a bar, right? Everybody's drinking, everybody's talking, having a good time. And what I found is that I was really struggling to initiate and maintain conversations. And I'm looking around me, and nobody else is having this struggle. And at one point in time, I'm at a networking event, and I'm literally the only person at this entire networking event not engaged in a conversation. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so I went back and I Googled it again. And again, there's a lot of things that it could be, but one of them pops up, autism spectrum disorder. And I'm like, okay, that's 2 dominoes now. So fast forward a couple of months, and I'm a single guy. I'm not married. I'm, not dating anybody. And at the time, I was, I had found there was a local Facebook group for people in my little, part of Phoenix that I live in. And somebody decided, somebody was like, somebody should do like a singles mixer. And so somebody coordinated a singles mixer. So I'm like, I'll go to a singles mixer. And I go there. And again, it's so difficult for me to initiate conversations and maintain conversations, to the point, again, where I'm standing at this singles mixer, and I'm standing at the bar all by myself. I'm literally the only person there that's not engaged in a conversation. It took me I was there for maybe 45 minutes, and I was like, this isn't working. I'm out. And I left. So again, now I'm getting this same kind of like repeating behavior and pattern. And I just started, these dominoes kept falling and kept falling and kept falling. And every single time I would like do a Google search to figure out what these dominoes were, it was like one of the causes was autism. And so when you have like all these different things, and the one thing they all share in common as potential causes is autism.
Yeah.
Wait, maybe I am. Maybe there's something to this. So the catalyst that finally made me seek my diagnosis was I was later on that year in 2023, I was dating somebody. We'd started dating in like August. And, I had told her that I thought I might be on the spectrum and that I had kind of self-diagnosed. And so we knew it was a thing, possibly a thing. And going into holiday season that year, so like, Christmas time of 2023, we were really struggling to communicate. We were really struggling to get along. We were not doing well as a couple. And a lot of it came down to communication challenges. Yeah. And we were struggling to communicate and get on the same page. And, she basically said, I think you need to go get diagnosed because, we're having a lot of communication issues and like, you need to get diagnosed. So I was like, all right, cool. Like, let me see if I can get diagnosed. Fortunately, I have a good friend of mine who is a doctor of psychology, and I had talked to her and her husband, who is also a really, really good friend of mine. I had talked to them about my self-diagnosis, and she was like, "Hey, yeah, let me like find somebody that does adult diagnoses," because I was looking it up, and it's really difficult to find somebody that does diagnoses for adults, right? You can find a million people that do diagnoses for kids, but not for adults. So she went into some of her stuff that she has access to because she's a doctor of psychology and found a couple of folks that she referred me to. By this point in time, me and the woman that I was dating, we split up. We couldn't get on the same page with communication. And so it ended. And then right after that, I got my appointment with the psychologist and got my diagnosis. Okay. So at the time, so to answer your second part of your question of was there people along the journey helping you with this journey? So, one of the people that was involved in that was the woman that I was dating at the time, my friend, the psychologist, my friend who was her husband, and then my parents. I talked to my parents about this a few times as well on the journey to getting my diagnosis. So I did have some folks in my corner as I was, leading up to getting formally diagnosed.
That unveils like a lot of kind of the pieces that I want to touch on, but I think one of the main ones is this assumption that a diagnosis that has to do with mind, it's only emotional, right? Like it only shows up in your brain or in behaviors. But I want you to talk to me, once you got your diagnosis, was there any physical signs that you said, is this related? Should I need to go to, and why I'm asking this is because I think health in general should have an approach that is holistic approach. And more times than not, it's not the case. And so I think autism now has shown to have many effects on the physical condition of humans. And so I want to know, after you got, yes, this is what you have, were there any other thing physically that showed up in your aha moments?
Not so much physically from like a health and wellness standpoint, but there were a lot of things that were aha moments that are physical in nature. So like, for example, I've always been somebody that fidgets a lot with my hands. My hands are constantly fidgeting. And for a lot of my life, you had a thing where you used to kind of scratch your cheek. Yeah. Well, I've always picked at my fingernails. And so I've always got like a hangnail or something going somewhere to the point where I'll like actually make my fingernails bleed. And so, I had that. I talked about how I was very small. I was also very thin. And part of that was that I had a lot of, and this was a massive aha moment. I was a horrifically picky eater when I was young. And to the point where I can remember being like 6 years old and my parents sitting me down with a meal that they cooked that I didn't want to eat. And I mean, I went to my room and cried because I couldn't get something else to eat. And because we weren't, I mean, my parents are fantastic, but we didn't have the financial resources to make me a unique meal. Right. Like I got what everybody else got. And if you didn't want it, then that's fine. You didn't have to eat it. You're going to go hungry. And somebody else is going to get the leftovers, but like, we don't have the financial resources to go make you your own dedicated meal. Right. So I remember crying because I couldn't eat that night and I was hungry. And we used to have a massive problem keeping weight on me. So because I was such a picky eater. And I mean, I tell this story like crazy because so I grew up playing sports. Now, I played baseball and football. And in football, they use it's a weight class system. It's age and weight. So they do like weight classes. And so you have a weight class, you have an upper limit and a lower limit for your weight class, for the division you play in. And I was so small, I was always on the lower end of the weight class to the point where we used to have to put like rocks in my shoes for me to make weight before a game.
Oh my sweet Lord. Okay.
So no, I mean, we would put rocks in my shoes just for me to get on the scale.
And you wouldn't walk on the rocks all the day.
No. It was just put them in to get on the scale to make sure you make weight, and then as soon as you're done, dump the rocks out and put your shoes back on. But we used to have to put rocks in my shoes to make sure that I would make weight and be eligible to play that day.
It is a fascinating world where you find someone like you, right? Like I wrote this on my book where I put my mother went to the limits, and all the parents how grateful we should be for them. My mother once, her desperation was so big that she put a nail on an apple so it oxidates, because I was anemic until I was like 13. Like I had really, really bad anemia episodes. And so my need for iron was so big that she went to the point of like oxidating the apple and then give me like a little piece. Same with you, right? I think, and we're gonna cover this in other episode, but like the medical stuff, I think that's gonna come in another episode. But like to your story, what are some things I wanna know if all these things that made you self-diagnosed were also happening when you were in your teenage years, like for example, the hard stuff with relationships, the communication things. I want you to talk to me about your friends aspect of life, how many friends you had when you were young, how many friends you have now, because I think I want to know if there was a before and after regardless of the late diagnosis. I want to know if there was a before and after in your life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this. So when I was young, if I had friends, it was mostly I would have one friend at a time. I never had like big friend groups where, you got 5, 6, 10 people, they're all friends together. If I had a friend, it was one at a time. I didn't always have friends though. Sometimes I didn't have friends. But I, for the most part, I had some friends, but it was usually either 1 or 2 or 3 people at the most that I was friends with. When it comes to, and that was true all the way up through pretty much like the end of high school. Okay. When it comes to like dating, God, I went to one dance throughout all of high school, and it was a miserable experience for her. It was a Sadie Hawkins dance, so it was the girls ask out the boys. And I was asked out to the dance. And I was a senior, she was a sophomore. And I don't remember what happened, but I said or did something that she absolutely hated me after that and wouldn't speak to me after that night. Probably because it was my very first time being on any kind of like a date at all in any way, shape, or form. That was my only dating experience up through high school. Now in college, when I graduated high school and went to college, my experience changed a little bit, but I think a lot of that is just due to the nature of college, right? I did have a friend group. I became a lot more social. I did, go on some dates and have some girlfriends. Nothing that ever really lasted. The longest I ever dated somebody all through college was 2 months. And none of those ended because I wanted to end them. They all ended because they were done with me. Friend groups, I had, good friend groups, but there was a weird thing where my friend groups almost always, my friendships and friend groups almost always had an expiration date. So whether that was a year or 2 years,
Oh my God.
they would have an expiration date and we would go our separate directions. And I actually, looking back on college, I didn't finish college my first time through. And it is, I attribute that to mostly because I did not know how to balance the social life and the student life. Because, growing up, I didn't have friends. Now suddenly I've got friends. And if they want to go out on a Wednesday night and I've got homework to do, I can't say no. Because if I say no, they may never ask me to go out again. They may never invite me again. So I couldn't say no. And so that lack of balance is what caused me to fail out of school my first time around. And the other thing that I think that caused me to have more friends is, that's when I finally started, drinking alcohol. And I felt like alcohol allowed me to be less shy. I really came out of my shell a lot. And so I probably drank too much when I was in college, which contributed to me failing out. I can look at it now and say it's probably what happened. But again, that's probably a case of, had I been diagnosed earlier in life and had some more support around social, really the social aspect of life, maybe that would have been different. I'm where I'm at now, and I'm perfectly happy with where I'm at now. So it's not like a regret moment or anything, but it's certainly one of those things where you're like, yeah, I probably would have finished my first time through had I, known about this and had a diagnosis and had some support.
I'm sure now with your diagnosis as an adult, as a successful CEO, this question might have a different answer, but I want you to answer it before all these good things happen to Drew. How did you deal with the social stigma before knowing what you know today? So meaning you told me, well, I didn't date enough. I know that in a lot of societies, the guy not dating for X amount of years is automatically you're gay. Automatically you're something. Automatically, because that's life, right? Like we need to put people in boxes in order for us to accept them and in order for our little brains to understand that they are something like us. And so, but how did you deal with that when you were young without a diagnosis and without really understanding what was going on? Like why you couldn't hold on a relationship for more than 2 months? Tell me.
Yeah, I mean, so, I did end up having in my 20s and 30s, I did end up having some longer term relationships.
Okay.
But, I always struggled with, dating. It was always a lot more difficult for me to talk to women than any of my friends. My friends could just spark up a conversation and it, no problem. And I just couldn't. And so, Yeah, I mean, again, we're getting vulnerable here. There's numerous times where, I would just lay down and cry because it felt like, it felt like there was something wrong with me. It really did. It felt like there was something wrong with me that I couldn't quite quantify what was wrong with me. But clearly something was wrong with me because the people around me have no problem getting dates and getting relationships. And I mean, they bounce from one relationship to the next. And I couldn't string something together longer than 2 months or 6 months. And so it was really, really, it was tough. It was tough. I lost, I had very, very little, and I know that this is a contributing factor to why I struggled so much, but I had horrible confidence when it came to dating and just social life generally. Like I had horrible confidence. I had almost no confidence in my ability to meet new people and make friends and talk to a woman and go on a date. And so it was tough. Now, post diagnosis, I would say that I would say that not a whole lot has changed in terms of my ability to make friends, my ability to, go on a date. It's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I just have a much better understanding of the why behind it. And it makes it a little bit easier. I mean, it's still, I still struggle with stuff like, I'm on the dating apps right now and I can't get a conversation to last more than 3 or 4 back and forths. And, I had 2 women that I had matched with and asked them on a date and they never responded. So, and things had been going great right up until that point. And now suddenly it's like, okay, apparently there's no interest anymore. Okay, cool, whatever. And I also know though that like for a lot of neurotypical people, modern day dating sucks. So I know that it's not entirely, a me thing. But I still see a lot of, people that are very similar to me that don't struggle with it to the same extent that I do. And it's a little, at times it can be a little disheartening. So the biggest thing for me post-diagnosis has just been an understanding of what the cause is. I no longer think something's wrong with me. I know like it's this thing that I struggle to make social bonds with people and that's just how things are.
It hits different, absolutely. Like and that's what I ended up the previous episode with kindness to yourself, right? Because we tend to go and find who is the guilty person here to blame. And generally, like that person end up being ourselves. But now talk to me about how did you translate those challenges now to the workspace? How the hell did Drew made it to be CEO to a company? It doesn't matter if it's a 1 or a million people company. At the end, you have to make decisions. You have to be in contact with people every single day. Come.
Yeah, I mean, I think I struggled with my career for a while because I got into marketing without a college degree. And marketing is a very competitive industry. It's a very competitive field. The vast majority of folks in marketing have a degree. And also, like you mentioned in the last episode, marketing is a very social field. I actually started my career out of college in sales, which if you want a social field, sales is even more social than marketing. So, I survived as a sales rep for 3.5 years before I burned out and went into marketing. But I really struggled to make any kind of career progress until I joined a consulting company back in 2015 that really changed my career trajectory. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to 2 people that are to this day still very close, dear friends of mine. the CEO of that company, Justin Gray, who I'm meeting for lunch with the day after we're recording this podcast. And who was eventually, at the time when I started there, the VP of services, Andrea Lechner-Becker. Andrea in particular was probably the very first direct boss that I ever had that really worked to build my confidence. She saw something in me from a skill set standpoint and a work ethic standpoint that made her lean in and help develop my skill set and helped me see what good looks like. But then also helped build my confidence and helped protect me from, some of the stuff that bad leadership in other areas and people that may have been, not really advocates for me. She really helped protect me from some of that. And so I actually owe a lot of where I'm at now to Andrea and Justin. A ton. And, I never, at no point in time in my life did I ever think I'm going to start a business and be a CEO. I never thought that. I kind of fell into it because of math, basically. I'm a numbers and data and statistics nerd, even though I work in marketing, which doesn't seem like it fits, but I'm a numbers and data and statistics nerd. And before I started the company I'm in now, I was at a company where I was basically building my company today, but in another company. And I sat down and I was like, I'm working 80-hour weeks. I'm trying to build this business. And I'm looking at it, I was like, if I were to build this business to be $10 million a year, this department in this business to be $10 million a year, what would that do to my income? And I did the math and I'm like, oh, that would do nothing. That would barely do anything to I'm going to work my ass off to build a business for somebody else and give them all the money. This makes no sense. And so I did a little bit more math about like what it would take to, keep me afloat financially in terms of like, if I start my own business, how many projects, how many customers do I need to keep me afloat financially? And I was like, okay, that's actually not that bad. And so I called up, at the time, probably I would consider him an acquaintance at the time. Now I consider him a friend who works for a company that we partner with, who sends us clients. And I said, hey, do you think if I'm thinking about doing this thing where I'm going to start my own business, do you think you could still get me clients if I go start my own business? And how many do you think you could help me start with? And he's like, I would prefer you do this on your own. I would send you more deals if you do this on your own versus be inside this company. So let's do this. Let's make this happen. And that was on a Thursday, and I took the weekend to think about it. And on Monday, I submitted my resignation and started the process of starting my business.
I need the name of your friend at that company. Like, everybody needs that on their life. But I guess true, like we've been talking for almost 45 minutes here. And I think the biggest question that I've been wanting to ask you is, now as an adult, and you go as comfortable as you want on this one, but are there any parts of yourself that you haven't forgiven yourself for when you were a kid?
Wow, we're getting deep here. I don't think so. There's things that I certainly wish I had done differently. But nothing that I would say that like I needed forgiveness for. I don't think there's anything I needed forgiveness for, but some of the things that I wish I had done differently is, number one, just, stood up for myself more. I didn't stand up for myself a lot when I was getting bullied and picked on, and I should have stood up for myself more. The other thing is, I think that I should have leaned into the skills and talents that I had versus leaning away from them.
Yep.
I was I was a very early developer in terms of intellect. I started reading when I was 2. By the time I was in kindergarten, I was doing third grade reading and third grade math. And so I skipped a grade, I skipped to first grade. And, because I got bullied and picked on for being the young smart kid, I tried to lean away from being the smart kid. Right. And I tried to be the cool kid instead of just leaning into what I really was as a human, which was, I was studious. I loved reading. I was a voracious reader. I memorized an entire encyclopedia about dinosaurs. You could name a dinosaur and I would tell you whether they were alive during the Jurassic, the Triassic, or the Cretaceous period. I could tell you exactly how many millions of years ago they lived, the range. I could tell you, I could describe every single one of them. I could tell you their height, their weight, their length. I mean, I had an encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. But I didn't lean into it. I didn't embrace it because it was something that, I was a little bit ashamed of because it's the thing that got me bullied and picked on, right? So I wish I had really, truly just leaned into who I really was instead of trying hard to be somebody I wasn't. But again, I was a kid. That kid does not need to be forgiven for anything because he was a kid, right? He didn't know any better. He was just trying to survive.
Yeah. I mean, I have those conversations with myself all the time, and it's never as a kid. It's more like in the later years, right? I think that bleeds into my last question for today, and I'm sure, audience, that you're gonna hear a lot more about Drew's journey and myself as well. But on the nice side of the coin, are you grateful for something that has been brought up by your autism today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful about having just so much more self-awareness. I have these things about myself that make me different. And since I've gotten the diagnosis, I've kind of, like you said, you've got some frameworks and some things that you've learned that help you do things like, I love to use examples because I think it helps people understand things better. So like one of the examples is, I used to, and I've done this my entire life. It's actually one of the things that contributed to my self-diagnosis is if I were at a dinner table with, let's say you're at a dinner table with, 8 people, 10 people, like a group of people, right? I would go into what I called at the time sensory overload. I didn't know that I had autism and that it really truly was sensory overload, but I would go into what I called sensory overload, and it would prevent me from actually being able to engage in any of the conversations because I'd be listening to this conversation, I'd be listening to this conversation, I'd be listening to this conversation at the opposite end of the table and this conversation next to me, and I'm paying attention to 4 or 5 conversations happening, which means that I can't participate in any of them. All I can do is listen. And part of it was because I didn't want to end the dinner without having had a chance to talk to everybody at the table. I felt like it would be rude to not talk to everybody, have a conversation with everybody at the table. And I would have these moments where I would literally be at a dinner table with people I know that I'm friends with, and I wouldn't say a word for half hour, 45 minutes because I'm in this state of sensory overload. And one of the things that I learned is I learned a way to get around that. And what I learned is that, I tested this at a dinner at Adobe Summit where I was like, hey, I'm going to focus on this part of the table. I spoke to somebody that was joining us. I was like, hey, I want to focus on this at this part of the table, but I want to make sure I make time for other people at the table as well. So when we're done with dinner and we're just having drinks, can we switch seats? And then that way you can also talk to this end of the table and then I can talk to this end of the table. And that person was like, yeah, totally. That sounds like a great idea. So now I use that all the time. And when I go to functions like that, I will always pick somebody, preferably somebody that knows that I'm on the spectrum, somebody that I've, shared this with. And I'll say, hey, I want to switch seats with you after dinner so I can talk to the other people at the other end of the table. And everybody's always said, yeah, that's totally fine. Let's do that. And it helps me focus on this side of the table because I know that I'm going to have an opportunity later on to go talk to this side of the table. Right. And so I don't go into that sensory overload where I'm trying to pay attention to 5 conversations because I know I'm going to get there later. So that's something that had I never gotten my diagnosis, I would have never developed that. I would have never figured that out because I wouldn't have even known what this is. I would have just sat there paralyzed because I'm trying to listen to 18 conversations at once and can't say a damn word. So I would have just done this the rest of my life. But now I have these tools that I can use I consider it's reducing the impact of my diagnosis on my daily life. And for that,
beating yourself coming back to the hotel, whatever, because you didn't understand anything and you didn't meet anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, I consider it just, reducing the impact that it has on my life. And for that, I'm really grateful that I got the diagnosis and was able to get into therapy and, develop these frameworks. And I mean, that thing with the table thing, that wasn't even something my therapist gave me. That was something I just kind of did on my own as a test, and it worked tremendously. And now that's just something I have in my back pocket that I can use whenever I want now.
I think we're gonna do an episode of one-on-one marketing on the spectrum, and that's gonna be covering conferences, of course, and social engagement. For today, thank you so much, Drew. It's been really insightful and very relatable, at least for me, to hear your story because I feel like there's commonalities definitely. And I hope people had a good time hearing you as well. And so stay tuned for the next episodes. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's.
Well, thanks for having me and let me share my story. And I got to say, it was fun sharing it because there were so many times where I would say something and I would see your eyes light up or your smile, and I just knew that you were like, I knew that sounds like me. So I love those moments, and so it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Beautiful. See you on the next one.
All right, we'll see ya.